Emily and I had been together for 3 years. 3 years of birthdays, lazy Sundays, late-night drives, and whispered dreams about the future. We had a kind of love that felt untouchable. At least, that's what I thought. I unlocked my phone, trying to mask the panic rising in my chest. Her message continued. "I don't know how to say this, but I think you deserve the truth." My heart skipped. I told myself not to read too much into it, but curiosity, or maybe a sense of impending doom, made my fingers swipe faster. "I've been seeing someone else. I'm sorry." The words didn't just hit me, they shattered me. The world around me seemed to blur. I remember sitting there, phone trembling in my hands, trying to comprehend what I was reading. No, this can't be real. Not Emily, not us. The next hours were a blur of confusion, anger, and disbelief. I reread the message at least 5 times, hoping my eyes had played a cruel trick. But every time the reality remained, Emily had betrayed me. She had chosen someone else over the life we had built. I thought about all the signs I might have missed. The late nights she spent working, the texts she quickly hid, the sudden change in her laughter. I had trusted her completely, blindly, and she had shattered that trust without a second thought. I reached for my laptop, almost instinctively. Read it. Somewhere, among strangers who didn't know me, I needed to feel less alone. I typed in the obvious. My girlfriend cheated on me. The stories came flooding back. Posts about betrayal, heartbreak, revenge, and the gnawing question everyone asks when they're left in the dark. How did I not see it coming? Scrolling through, I found a story eerily similar to mine. A man discovered texts from his girlfriend to another guy, hidden under innocent conversation threads. The comments poured in, some sympathetic, some cruel, some offering advice I wasn't ready to hear. I read them all. As if by consuming the stories of strangers, I could somehow make sense of my own pain. By the time the sun started creeping through my blinds, I realized I hadn't slept. I hadn't eaten. I hadn't even breathed properly. My mind replayed every memory, trying to find the moment things went wrong. But there was no obvious point of failure, just a slow, quiet betrayal that had been hiding in plain sight. When Emily finally called later that morning, I didn't answer. I couldn't. The words I wanted to say, the hurt, the anger, the confusion, would have sounded weak if I let them out. She left a voicemail, a trembling mix of guilt and fear. "I never meant for it to happen like this. Please, let's talk." I deleted the voicemail without listening to the second half. I didn't want to hear her excuses. I didn't want to feel the remnants of the love I once had. That day, I stayed in my apartment, scrolling through Reddit, reading post after post about betrayal, heartbreak, and the consequences of cheating. It became my strange form of therapy. Strangers telling strangers their deepest pains, their regrets, their confessions. It made my own story feel less isolating. But beneath the numbness, anger started to build. Anger not just at Emily, but at myself, at my blind trust, at my vulnerability, at my refusal to see the signs. And somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered, "You can't let this just end here. You need to know everything." And that's when I made the decision. I wasn't going to wait for Emily to explain. I was going to uncover the truth myself. Every hidden message, every deleted conversation, every late-night lie, I would find it all. Because sometimes in the wake of betrayal, knowing the full story is the only way to reclaim even a fragment of your own peace. The next day, I started with the small things. My phone, my laptop, any place where secrets might hide. I knew it sounded obsessive, maybe even unhealthy, but obsession felt like the only way to cope. If I could piece together exactly what had happened, maybe I could make sense of the heartbreak eating me alive. I opened her laptop first. She always left it unlocked when she went out, a habit I had once thought was a sign of trust. Now it felt like an open invitation into the betrayal I feared. I sifted through emails, looking for anything that seemed out of place. There was nothing at first, just bills, work messages, her usual subscriptions. Then I found it. A draft message, saved but never sent, addressed to a name I didn't recognize. I can't wait to see you tonight. It feels like we've been sneaking around forever. I don't want anyone to find out. My stomach dropped. The handwriting of betrayal was undeniable, and the name at the top, Jason, sent a shock straight through my chest. I had heard of Jason before, a coworker she mentioned in passing, friendly, charming, the type who smiled too much and left people wondering what he was really thinking. Emily had told me nothing about him beyond office small talk, and now here it was, proof that what I feared was real. I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or throw the laptop across the room. I did none of those things. Instead, I sat there, paralyzed by disbelief. The logical part of my mind was screaming, "This isn't enough. You need more. You need to see the pattern." So I dug deeper. Her phone had been another obstacle. She always had a passcode, something I respected in the early days as a boundary. But today, driven by a mix of desperation and determination, I found a way around it. I remembered she used the same code for multiple devices. The moment I guessed correctly, it felt like stepping into a dangerous, forbidden zone. Messages flooded in. Jason, and another name, Liam. Texts exchanged late at night, flirty at first, but escalating quickly into something far more intimate. Photos she had sent, captions that read like confessions, the kind you only share when you think no one else will ever see them. My head spun, my chest tight. Scrolling through it all, I realized how systematic it had been. Not just one mistake, not a single lapse in judgment, but months of deception. Every dimmer out with colleagues, every weekend she spent at work, every late-night text she claimed was from a friend, all carefully constructed lies. I felt a wave of anger rise, not the kind that comes and goes, but a deep, gnawing kind that burrows into your bones. It wasn't just betrayal, it was premeditated. And worse, I had unknowingly been the perfect cover. I turned to Reddit again, desperate for some anchor in the chaos. The subreddits I found myself lurking in were merciless. r/relationships, r/cheating, r/am I the asshole. People shared confessions of infidelity, heartbreak, revenge, and catharsis. I wasn't looking for revenge, at least not yet, but reading the experiences of others helped me feel less insane. I wasn't alone in this hell. One post caught my attention. A man had discovered months of messages between his partner and a coworker, and he had decided to confront them head-on. The post was raw, filled with rage and grief, but it ended with a lesson. You deserve the truth, even if it destroys everything. I printed out screenshots, compiled texts into documents, and organized everything in a folder labeled Emily. Every piece of evidence was another brick in the wall of reality I was building. I needed to understand how she had deceived me so completely, and for how long. Then came the confrontation. Not in person, at least not yet, but in my own mind. I imagined every possible scenario, me screaming, crying, walking away, begging for an explanation, demanding honesty. Every version ended the same way: betrayal, shock, heartbreak. But the internet wasn't just a source of validation. It gave me ideas, suggestions, confessions, tactical approaches. Some commenters suggested cutting all contact immediately. Others argued for slow, strategic exposure. One thing became clear. I had to protect myself emotionally and mentally before doing anything else. That evening, I texted Emily, "We need to talk, tonight." Her reply came almost instantly. "Yes, of course, I'll be home by 7. I spent the next few hours pacing my apartment, rehearsing questions and responses, knowing none of it would feel enough. By the time she walked in, her face was pale, eyes wide. I realized in that moment how much she had underestimated the storm she had created. I wanted to tell you in person," she said, her voice shaking. "I didn't want you to find out like this." "Like what?" I asked, my tone controlled but cold. "Like months of lies, hidden messages, secret dinners, and photos I shouldn't have seen? Or like the fact that you've been seeing Jason this whole time?" Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came out that made any sense. I could feel the tension thickening between us. This was the moment of truth, the confrontation that every Reddit post had warned about. I didn't mean to hurt you," she finally whispered. It happened. I didn't know how to stop." I wanted to scream, to shout, to shake her until the anger left my body. But I didn't. Instead, I asked the question that had haunted me for days. Why him? Why not me? She couldn't answer. Not with words. Just tears, silence, and a desperation that now felt too little, too late. I realized something important then. Betrayal doesn't just destroy trust. It changes you. The person you thought you knew, the life you thought you were living, the future you envisioned, it all shifts in an instant. And there's no coming back from that, not fully. Later that night, I returned to my laptop. Reddit was waiting, the endless scroll of human pain, regret, and betrayal. I didn't feel better, but I felt awake, clearer. I had seen the full scope of the deception, understood the reality I was in, and had begun to reclaim my sense of self. The storm was far from over. Confrontations were just the beginning. There were choices to make, decisions about forgiveness or revenge, about letting go or exposing the truth. And deep down, I knew that once this path was fully walked, nothing would ever be the same again. It wasn't just Jason. There were other names I hadn't seen before. Friends, co-workers, someone who called herself just a friend in messages that were anything but innocent. I realized betrayal isn't a single act. It's often a series of calculated decisions, repeated over and over until the walls you built around yourself crumble completely. I tried talking to friends, but my words felt hollow. "She cheated. I found out. It's real." Those sentences barely conveyed the depth of the knife twisting in my chest. Some friends offered sympathy, others suggested confrontation, revenge, or simply walking away. Their advice was practical, but I wasn't ready for practicality yet. I wanted truth. Absolute, undeniable truth. Reddit became my map. r/relationships and r/cheating were my guides. Every story I read had parallels to mine. Hidden accounts, late-night messages, manipulative lies. People described the same shock, the same heartbreak, the same rage. One user's confession in particular hit me hard. You think you know someone, you love them, and then you find out they've been living a secret life behind your back. There's no pain like it. And when you confront them, they make it about themselves, their mistakes, their guilt, not yours. It was like someone had taken the words directly out of my head. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't alone. I started to notice patterns in Emily's behavior. She avoided eye contact. Her phone never left her hand. She fumbled words or changed subjects when I asked simple questions. It was exhausting, mentally and emotionally. I would catch myself staring at her, trying to read every micro-expression, every subtle cue, as if I could divine the entire scope of her betrayal from the tilt of her lips or the movement of her eyes. One night, as she slept, I quietly accessed her email again. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed answers. That's when I found the messages I hadn't seen before, exchanges between Emily and Jason that revealed plans I hadn't imagined. They weren't just seeing each other, they had been planning trips together, secret gifts, moments meant to exclude me. The realization hit me like a freight train. She had been living a parallel life while I believed in us. I sat in my living room, laptop open, staring at the screen. My heart was racing, my hands shaking. Part of me wanted to throw the laptop, scream, erase everything. But another part, the part that Reddit had nurtured, knew that documentation was power. Knowledge was power, and I intended to use it. Then came the social media discovery. I found an Instagram account she had made under a fake name. Pictures of her and Jason laughing in restaurants I had never been taken to. Selfies with captions meant to be intimate, not public. Every image, every comment, every tag was a dagger twisting in my chest. I started saving screenshots, compiling them in chronological order. There was a strange satisfaction in knowing the truth, but it was accompanied by a hollow ache, a realization that the person I loved had existed in layers I couldn't access until now. Reddit advice became more strategic. Some users suggested confronting the other person, Jason, directly. Others advised patience, planning, and gathering incontrovertible evidence before making any moves. I considered it all, weighing morality against the primal need for justice, for understanding, for closure. Emily noticed the change in me. I was colder, more distant, sharper in my words. One evening she asked, "Why are you acting like this? What are you planning?" I looked at her, letting the silence stretch, letting the tension build until it was almost unbearable. "I'm not planning anything," I said finally. "I'm just figuring out what you've been planning all along." Her face paled. That flicker of fear or guilt was all I needed. I realized something then. She had underestimated me. She thought the betrayal would stay hidden, that I would never find the pieces she tried so hard to hide. But I had found them all. And now the balance of power was shifting. I decided to dig deeper, to reach beyond just Emily's accounts. I wanted to know everything. Her calls, her texts, her calendar. I needed to map the network of deception, understand who had been complicit, who had been a confidant, and who had simply watched from the sidelines. Days turned into nights, and nights blurred into early mornings. I barely slept, barely ate. My obsession with the truth consumed me. But each new discovery, each confirmation of betrayal, only strengthened my resolve. I wasn't seeking revenge, not yet, but I was preparing myself, preparing for the confrontation, for the reckoning, for the moment when all secrets would finally be exposed. Then came the moment I feared most, when Jason texted her directly, not realizing I had access. I read every word. He was brazen, arrogant, dismissive. The disrespect toward me, toward our relationship, ignited a fury I hadn't known I was capable of. I felt a shift inside me. Pain was transforming into something else, clarity, focus, and an almost tactical calm. I realized that betrayal is not just about heartbreak, it's about control. She had tried to control my perception, my emotions, my trust, and now the control was mine. I confronted Emily again, this time armed with proof. I showed her the screenshots, the messages, the photos. Her face went white. Her voice trembled. For the first time, she didn't have excuses, didn't try to rationalize her actions. She just sat there, broken, facing the full weight of her choices. "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered, almost inaudibly. I don't know why I did it." Her words were meaningless now. Words can't undo months of deception, can't erase the trust destroyed, can't fix the reality that now existed between us. And as I left the apartment that night, I felt something I hadn't in weeks, a strange mix of liberation and grief. I knew the confrontation was only the beginning. There were still more truths to uncover, more decisions to make, and more ways to heal or destroy what remained of my life. Because betrayal is a journey, not a single event. And sometimes the path to understanding requires walking through fire after fire, facing not just the betrayer, but your own pain, your own weaknesses, your own choices. I returned to Reddit, my only constant in this storm of chaos, and realized one thing: I wasn't alone. Others had been here, others had felt this pain, others had navigated the twisted maze of lies and deceit. And maybe, just maybe, if I followed their guidance and my own instincts, I could survive this, and, one day, find peace again. After the confrontation, the apartment felt like a different place. The walls, once familiar, now seemed foreign, witnesses to lies, deception, and secrets that had poisoned the life we shared. Emily's presence was heavy, her guilt palpable, but it was no longer enough to satisfy the whirlwind of questions inside me. I needed to know everything. The first step was understanding the full scope of Jason's role. I didn't just want to know what had happened between Emily and him. I needed the context, the intentions, the patterns. Who had initiated what? How long had this been going on? Was it just about lust, or had emotions, manipulation, even obsession been involved? I started with social media, Jason's profiles, his posts, photos, the subtle likes and comments that hinted at secret meetings, inside jokes, and private communication. Emily had tried to keep these hidden, but the digital footprints were everywhere. I followed them like a trail of breadcrumbs, documenting every interaction. It wasn't just Jason. There was Liam, the other name I had noticed earlier. He wasn't as central, but he was a player in this twisted game. Messages showed that Emily had confided in him, sought validation, shared emotions and stories about her secret life with Jason. I realized betrayal often isn't isolated. It's a network of complicity. I compiled everything into folders, organized, detailed, chronological. Each file, each screenshot was a piece of a puzzle that revealed the ugly truth. Emily had been living multiple lives simultaneously, crafting an alternate reality I could never have guessed. Emily noticed my obsession growing. Her attempts at conversation became weaker, more hesitant. She'd sit on the couch, staring at the floor, muttering apologies that sounded rehearsed. But I didn't respond with words. I responded with silence. The silence was more powerful. It made her realize that the lies she had told had consequences far beyond her control. One evening, she tried to reach out. "Please, can we talk?" I looked at her, letting the weight of weeks of deception hang in the air. "We've talked. I just don't think you understand what you've done yet. I'm not angry. I'm aware. And awareness changes everything." She didn't respond. She couldn't, because she knew I wasn't bluffing. And for the first time, the person she had tried to manipulate had stepped out of the shadows. Reddit became my sanctuary again. I posted anonymously in r/relationships, recounting parts of the story, asking for advice without revealing identities. The responses were brutal, but honest. They ranged from leave her immediately to document everything and confront them together to don't engage, let them destroy themselves. The chaos mirrored my own thoughts, giving me clarity through the perspectives of strangers. But clarity alone wasn't enough. I realized that if I wanted control, I couldn't just sit back. I needed leverage. I started planning strategically, thinking about every interaction, every conversation, every potential fallout. I wasn't plotting revenge in a petty sense. I wanted truth, accountability, and a way to ensure I wasn't left emotionally vulnerable anymore. Then came the discovery that changed everything. Emily had been hiding physical meetings, not just digital communication, receipts, location tags, messages about rendezvous. Jason wasn't just a secret text, he was a real, tangible threat to the life we shared. The betrayal had crossed boundaries I hadn't even imagined. I confronted her again, in a controlled, calculated way. "You've been meeting him," I said quietly. "I know where, when, everything. Do you have anything to say?" She broke down completely. Tears streamed, words stumbled, excuses fell apart under the weight of evidence. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought it wouldn't matter. I didn't know how to stop. The excuses were meaningless. Actions speak louder than words, and her actions had spoken volumes. I realized something profound in that moment. Betrayal isn't about intent, it's about impact. She had irrevocably altered my life, and no words could undo that. I needed to protect myself emotionally. I cut off all unnecessary contact, changed passwords, secured accounts, and created boundaries. The digital war had been won. I had proof, knowledge, and control. But the emotional war was only beginning. I returned to Reddit, reading about others who had been in my position. One story struck me deeply. A man discovered months of infidelity, confronted the partners involved, and ultimately used the documentation not for revenge, but to rebuild his own life with awareness and strength. That became my goal. Not revenge, not humiliation, but reclaiming myself. Emily tried one last plea. "Please, I'll do anything. I can stop seeing him. We can work this out." I looked at her, seeing the familiar face I once loved, now twisted by guilt and fear. "Work this out?" I said softly. "Do you even understand what that means? Trust doesn't just return because you say it does. Actions have consequences, Emily, and some actions can't be undone." She nodded, defeated, but I wasn't satisfied, not yet. I needed to know if this was an isolated incident or part of something larger. I began to dig into Jason and Liam further, contacting sources, asking questions, subtly piecing together a network of influence and complicity. I wanted to know the full extent of the betrayal ecosystem. It became clear, Emily's deceit wasn't just about lust or emotion. It was about manipulation, ego, and secrecy. People had been drawn into her orbit, some willingly, others unknowingly complicit. And now, with all evidence in my hands, I had the power to expose everything, or keep it private. The tension between us grew unbearable. Every glance, every word, every gesture carried the weight of months of deception. She was no longer the woman I loved. She was a cautionary tale, a living proof of betrayal. One night, after weeks of observation and analysis, I sat alone in the dark, laptop open, documents organized, proof compiled. The fire of betrayal still burned, but alongside it was a new feeling: clarity, control, and a readiness for the final phase. The final confrontation was inevitable. Jason didn't know it yet, but he had become a target in the unraveling of this web. I had all the evidence: messages, photos, social media interactions, even location logs. Every deception was documented, every lie cataloged. I wasn't doing this out of malice. I was doing it for clarity, for justice, and for the final closure I needed. I arranged a meeting in a public place, neutral ground. I wanted him alone, unarmed with excuses, unable to hide behind excuses or charm. I arrived early, rehearsing every word, anticipating every reaction. When he finally arrived, he smiled that familiar smirk, the one Emily had once described as irresistible. The smile faded the moment he saw the folder in my hands. "What's that?" he asked casually. "This," I said, flipping it open to show him screenshots, photos, messages, everything. His eyes widened, then narrowed, then a flicker of fear appeared. You have all of this?" "I have everything," I said. "Months of deceit, secret meetings, lies you thought would never be discovered. Every word, every image, every interaction, it's all here." He tried to laugh it off, but it came out nervous, shaky. "Listen, it wasn't like you think." "Save it," I interrupted, voice calm but firm. "I'm not here to argue. I'm here to make sure you understand what your actions have done." He faltered, trying to gauge whether I was bluffing. I wasn't. I had spent weeks compiling proof, organizing evidence, and mentally preparing for this moment. And now, it was time for Jason to face reality. "You knew she was in a relationship," I said. "You knew she was committed. And yet you still chose to pursue her. You don't get to play the victim here." He opened his mouth, then closed it, realizing that words wouldn't save him. The truth was incontrovertible. I had the receipts, the documentation, the full story laid bare. After what felt like an eternity of silence, he finally muttered, I didn't think it would matter. I didn't think it would matter?" I asked, voice rising slightly. "It mattered. To me, to her, to every moment we shared that you poisoned with your lies and manipulations." He swallowed hard, shame and fear mingling in his eyes. I could see the realization settle in. His actions had consequences, and those consequences were finally unavoidable. The confrontation with Jason ended without violence. He left, pale and silent, and I realized something profound. The power of truth is stronger than anger. Exposing the deception, holding it up for scrutiny, and demanding accountability gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt since discovering Emily's betrayal. But the story didn't end there. Emily still remained, a ghost of the love I once knew. The apartment felt smaller now, suffocating with unspoken words and lingering resentment. I had to decide what I wanted, whether to rebuild, forgive, or sever ties entirely. I started by looking inward. Reddit had become my sounding board, a place to read stories, others who had faced betrayal and emerged stronger. Comments about healing, self-care, boundaries, and reclaiming one's life resonated deeply. I realized that closure wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about reclaiming my own sense of self. I called Emily into the living room, the folder of evidence between us. She sat quietly, eyes downcast. I spoke slowly, carefully, with deliberate calm. "I know everything," I said. "Not just the affair, but every lie, every deception, every secret meeting. You've faced consequences already. But now, you need to understand what this means for us, or more accurately, what it means for me." Her voice trembled. "Please, I can fix this. I'll do anything. I'll stop seeing him. We can work through this." I shook my head. "It's not about stopping. That's too little, too late. Actions have consequences. Trust has been broken in ways that words cannot repair." Tears streamed down her face. Genuine sorrow this time, but I had learned that sorrow doesn't erase betrayal. Love doesn't automatically forgive deceit, and sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that ensure you protect yourself. "I can't be with you anymore," I said, voice steady. "Not now. Not after everything. Maybe someday I can forgive, but I can't forget, and I can't pretend the past 3 years didn't happen the way they did." Her sobs filled the apartment, but I stayed composed. I had anticipated this reaction. I had planned for it. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Clarity. I left the apartment that night carrying nothing but the folder of evidence and a renewed sense of purpose. The betrayal had been devastating, but it had also given me a new perspective. I had survived the storm, faced the deception, and emerged aware, cautious, and stronger. Reddit remained my anchor. I posted one final story, anonymous but detailed, about the experience, discovering infidelity, uncovering the hidden networks of betrayal, confronting the players involved, and reclaiming control of my life. The responses poured in: support, empathy, stories of parallel experiences, advice on healing. For the first time, I felt less alone. I realized that while betrayal destroys trust in love, it also forces growth, awareness, and resilience. People who experience betrayal are not weaker. They are survivors navigating a treacherous landscape that few can imagine. Weeks later, I found myself walking through the city streets at night, a quiet sense of liberation in my chest. The pain of losing Emily lingered, but it no longer controlled me. I had faced the truth, confronted the deceivers, and reclaimed my life. And in that moment, I understood the ultimate lesson of betrayal. It is not the act itself that defines you, but the way you respond. Pain can destroy, or it can forge strength. Lies can shatter trust, or they can illuminate clarity. And endings, though often heartbreaking, can also become beginnings. I had survived the fire, and now I was free to rebuild, free to trust again, and free to live without the shadow of deception weighing me down.